is all about the kids. This is all about the kids as well. So we want to make sure that our athletes are empowering themselves by knowing this information from when they get to high school all the way through the end of high school. All right, so let me bring us down a little bit. So big talk, and I'm going to let Mrs. Randazza talk a little bit about this because she has some real personal experience on scholarships. So before I'm going to pass it off to her, I'm going to just talk about the idea of a scholarship. Please remember that although we associate athletic scholarships with Division I schools, Division II schools do give scholarships. But please bear in mind, depending on the sport your child is involved with, many scholarships are not full scholarships where they cover everything. Those are for the elite athletes, and they are a small percentage. It's the 1% of 1% that play high school athletics that are getting full scholarships. Many athletes receive, and Mrs. Randazza, I'm sure, can talk at great lengths about this, grants and other financial assistance that equal up to full payment of their tuition, but it's not always, for everyone as far as getting a full scholarship. Go ahead, Mrs. Randazza.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Cardillo. Absolutely, that is correct. So I have a daughter that just graduated Boston College in May, and she played Division I softball. She played all 4 years while she was there, and I got to know a lot of the athletes and all about the athletic scholarships and program. So most of her friends, most of her athletic friends on many different teams, the hockey team, the football team, the volleyball team, on all different teams, not just softball, did not have full scholarships. Most of them had a 20%, 30%, 40%, depending on what it was. There were a handful of full scholarships on our softball team. I think that was a total of 2 or 3. And then some of them incorporated like one piece with another. So do not believe, because a lot of people, even with my own child, would come to me and say, oh my gosh, that's wonderful. Your daughter got a scholarship. She's got a full ride to school. No, a scholarship is different than a full ride. My daughter got a great scholarship, but we still had to pay a good amount of money. So that's something to be aware of, but it does make a difference when you do get it. D1 and D2 definitely, will offer you something, sometimes a lot more, sometimes each year can be different. D1 especially, they can offer you a percentage for the first year, and then each year the percentage can change. They work it out depending on how many people, because every team gets so much money per school, and they have to work their scholarships out within that budget. And then we'll talk later about D3, but I know D3 does not give any athletic scholarships, but I find that more students get more money in D3 than they actually do in D1 and D2 because they get you money in other places.
And here's a little something else about Division I scholarships. Ivy League schools, Princeton, Yale, Harvard, do not give athletic scholarships, nor do schools in what's called a Patriot League. So for instance, Lehigh, Lafayette, schools of that nature, they do not grant athletic scholarships. So just kind of food for thought. And as you see here in bold, one of the most interesting things that people are often surprised at, less than 2% of these athletes become professional athletes. So less than 2% get scholarships, and less than 2% of those kids become professional athletes. So what we're training our young people for is to become scholars. That's why we're sending them to college, not to become athletes, professional athletes, because again, close to 99% of them will not be a professional athlete. So we're going to gloss over the national letter of intent very quickly. Not a big thing, but again, the national letter of intent binds you to a Division I school. I know the big thing now to celebrate our athletes is his signing day. Please note that a Division III school, you're never bound to anything. You don't sign any paperwork. And unless you're receiving a scholarship, an athletic scholarship to a Division II school, you're not bound, and there are no letters of intent. So really that's relegated to Division I schools. So to talk about the divisions, right? There are 3 divisions, Division 1, 2, and 3, and that's what we're getting into. I want to talk about that very briefly here, and we can get more in depth as this goes on. So again, here's what I love to show people is the statistics, and I'm just going to make this a little larger. The statistics of kids who are Division I athletes is so small, right? You look at that pie graph and you see that it's students who are athletes of 1 in 23, and then 1 in 10 at the Division II level, and then 1 in 6 at the Division III level. So scholarships are very, very difficult to come by. And you see the sheer percentages in that little chart on my left of the screen, and you see, and I know it's a little small, but look at the amount of athletes playing. And I'm a high school basketball coach at the varsity level. You see over 540,000 young men are playing basketball. And then when you go to NCAA student athletes at the basketball level, it's less than 19,000, right? Of that, right, the percentage of high school kids going to the NCAA, 3.5%, right? And that, so the numbers are so small. So when we look at our students, we say, oh, they're going to play at the next level. It is very, very difficult. I coached at Division III level for 3 years, and I could tell you it was a very difficult task for our young men, right? Because now they're going to class, they are watching film, trainer's room, and you go from being the, proverbial big fish in a small pond where you are one of your elite athletes at your high school, and now you're struggling to play at that Division III level. And for a lot of kids, it's very difficult. Just want to quickly open, because I think this is an important topic to open questions. Does anybody have any questions about, Mrs. Randazza may see these questions, so maybe you can handle them a little bit about the levels, the Division I, II, and III levels, and how that's broken up.
I don't have anything right now. I do want to say, though, in saying all this with the divisions and scholarship that they're hard, just remember that students are getting them, and they are, students are playing. It's a great opportunity. I think there are many plus sides to all of this. It does get a student involved in the school right away. It gives them a group. They feel like they belong there. But also remember, especially in Division I, if you're looking at that, which does give usually, more money. When you're talking that, you're talking about, we're going to talk about this now, time management. If it is hours when you're talking, if somebody has their, if somebody can put on mute, if there's noise in your background, I'm not sure. I'm muting just about everybody. Okay. So, you have to remember that it is a tremendous amount of time. There is a tremendous amount of time that it does involve, and you still have a full schedule of classes. So your child has to be the child that can handle the schedule and the element of working out at 5 a.m. And that doesn't count your practice hours, because your workouts are different, and you still got to get in your practice hours, which is usually, at different times of the day. So you'll have lift at one point of the day, and then you'll have practice hours. And then a lot of schools make mandatory study hall hours, which you think is wonderful, but I found that many athletes find that stressful because they want to go meet up with a different friend somewhere else and study on something else. And they can't at that moment because they have to be at a specific study hall with a specific group of people. So that's just something to remember. It is a lot of time. A lot of kids call it a job, and, you're getting money paid for school. So it does go hand in hand.
And please don't misunderstand Mrs. Randazza and myself. We would love for our kids to go on and play at the next level here. However, we want to be informative and educational as best as possible. So if these students do go to college to play a sport, They are well aware of what it really looks like. But then at the same time, right, as parents, we often encourage our kids to play sports or try to play at the next level. And so I think educating parents and students is very important so that when we jump into this, we know exactly what we're facing so that we are knowledgeable and we can make a decision. Okay, I do want to try to play at the next level, or you know what, this is not for me. And I want to be a student and I want to have a social life. And I'm good enough with playing at the rec center or an intramural league sport. That's enough for me. Because it does entail, as you see the chart in front of you, it does entail a great amount of time. So, you know, it's just it's food for thought more than anything for everyone. So, again, there's our time management. If I take us to the next slide.
Oh, really quick with the time management, I just wanted to bring up, and you know, I know the statistics seem like 1 or 2% of the kids going to school on a D1 scholarship seems like it doesn't, you know, wow, this is really hard. And it is, it definitely is. But I did have my daughter go. So it does happen. And it's just something to know that it's a process and it takes a while. And, you know, there's a whole, you know, process that goes along with it for a couple of years usually. But I will say also remember in time management, if you play D1 and some D2s, you travel a lot. And most of the time that travel is on an airplane. Okay, even through the pandemic last year, I heard schools were closed. My daughter was on a plane every weekend from January through May. She traveled on a plane every single weekend. That has to fit in. So they miss school sometimes on Friday, sometimes they miss it on Thursday. Once in a while, they'll miss it on Monday. They still have the obligation of classes and they still have the obligations of getting their work done. Don't listen to people when they say, oh, athletes, the school takes care of them. They make sure they get their work done. No, the athlete has to make sure that they get their work done and hand it in, whether they're in the class or in that state at that time. So that's just a little something to put in the back of your mind. D3 travels, but they travel within a 2 to 3 hour period. So that time frame. So that's usually a bus ride. And that's also a great experience. We'll go into that in a little bit.
But again, as you're seeing on the screen now, the amount of hours per week is exactly the same. And I'm going to flip to so this is the Division III chart, 168 hours a week. All right. If you go back right here to the Division I, it's exactly the same. So although you're not getting really you're getting less facilities at your disposal and you're putting in the same amount of hours. So that's important to understand, right? So sometimes we look at Division III athletes and we look at them as not as elite or not as committed as the Division I athlete. And that is incorrect. Sometimes it's much, much harder to be a Division III athlete than a Division I athlete. A little bit about eligibility. Again, academics is so important. Go back to what Mrs. Randazza said about this common misnomer about athletes getting taken care of and pampered and all these things. The eligibility standards continue to increase for college athletes. So it is harder than ever to remain eligible, whether it be going to class, passing your classes, doing well academically. That is, come to the forefront now more than ever. So college athletes are held to a very, very high standard.
We're lucky here at JP Stevens because we have a very strong curriculum and we have very strict graduation requirements. In fact, our graduation requirements to graduate high school in Edison are above what you need to get a high school diploma in New Jersey. So our standards to get a high school diploma here at JP Stevens actually meets all the criteria that you need to play Division I or Division II, because you have to make sure you take so many maths, so many Englishes, but it's wonderful for us here at JP and in Edison, because we already meet that criteria. We force our students to by making our graduation standards so high. So that's a wonderful thing for us.
And coupled with that, our athletic standards are higher than the state's. So our kids here already are in a great position as far as what are my standards of eligibility? Well, we've taken them up a notch here. So our kids are ready. You see in front of you a high school timeline, and this speaks exactly to what Mrs. Randazza was saying. We get our kids here in Edison and at JP Stevens so ready for the college process and so ready for if they are the college athlete, because our kids rarely ever have an issue with the NCAA clearinghouse and their eligibility, because they're taking all the necessary classes and extra classes to make them eligible and to make sure that they are well planned out. So again, if your son or daughter is thinking about playing at the next level, right away as a ninth grader, they should be registering for the NCAA clearinghouse and filling out information. Is not hard to do. You as a parent can work with your child to fill out those forms. And even if your son or daughter decides later on as a 10th or 11th grader, you could always go back and fill out the NCAA clearinghouse forms to make sure that all of your ducks are in a row and that child is ready to begin the college process and eligible right away.
I would recommend, if you are thinking, if your child loves to play a sport and they are thinking of doing something in college, whether it's D1, D2, D3, I recommend that you not only register your student, but I recommend that you certify that registration. Just because you don't know the opportunities that may come their way. And I think it's a $90 registration fee. So you don't have to register them. But if your child goes D1 or D2, eventually that account has to be registered. And I believe it's a $90 registration fee. That certifies it, I should say. That's a certification fee. You don't have to, if you're D3, if I'm correct, you don't have to do the certification. I think I did it anyway. I'm in a position where both of my daughters went to school and played athletics. So my youngest daughter is playing field hockey D3. And so I have the perspective of a D1 athlete and a D3 athlete. And my D3 child, I actually didn't expect her to play in college. And this opportunity came up. We were actually quite surprised. So I had to hurry up and fill out the clearinghouse and fill out all the forms, not expecting what it ended up happening. It was the best thing that actually did. But so don't panic, because I have some parents here, wait a minute, my child's in 11th grade, I didn't do this yet. It's okay. If your child's in 11th grade and you're still thinking about, athletics, you can go on and register an account now. It's fine.
So we're going to bring us to our next slide. This, for some reason, the slides aren't moving the way I'm asking them to, so well, just bear with us. And here's more information about the student registration. And you could go through that or have your child go through that at your leisure. Again, there's a lot of information. It's not extremely complicated. If your child or you are having difficulties with it, you could probably meet with your counselor, or Mrs. Randazza and I can walk them through this. Not difficult once you get online and register. The clearinghouse is a pretty simplistic process. A little bit about test scores, right? And we see a lot of schools going test optional. So some of this information may not apply to every school. Okay, but essentially, students are evaluated with their eligibility on almost a sliding scale. If the SAT's in play or the ACT's in play, where the higher their GPA, the lower their SAT for eligibility has to be. But again, when we get into schools that are test optional, that completely changes, right? But many of our athletes are encouraged by coaches, et cetera, to take the SAT. Sometimes academically, it allows them to get some financial aid, merit-based scholarships, etc. So that's why college coaches may be encouraging kids to take the standardized test.
I've actually, Mr. Cardillo, have had this situation where I've had some students here talking to coaches, and even though the school was going test optional, the coach asked them, said, our school is still requiring the athletes to have an SAT score to follow the same standards that they used to with NCAA, and they want that. And a lot of times it can help them get a little bit more money in different areas.
So again, this is a lot with the transcripts and the core courses. This is a lot of what we've talked about already. But understand, it goes back to both of our points, that our students here at JP Stevens are prepared with all the core courses. So we don't have to fit our athletes into anything because they're taking those core courses all the time, right? It's the 4 years of English, the 4 years of math. And again, state requirement only requires students in New Jersey to take, are required to take 3 years of math. We at JP Stevens and Edison go above that to the 4. Again, the 3 years of sciences, the 3 years of social studies, and then all their elective type courses. So our kids are well on track here at JP Stevens. So not much to worry about in terms of that.
So all they got to do is worry about the grade in the class and passing the class. They can't fail the class because that does change their GPA, and they do need a specific GPA depending on the sliding scale that the school is looking for. Each school, even Division I schools, vary. For example, if you're looking at, a Boston College and Notre Dame, they're looking for a GPA like a 3.5, a 3.8 or better. If you're looking at like a Monmouth University D1, right? They'll take the 3.0, the 2.9, depending. So even though we make sure our students meet all the criteria as far as what classes they're taking and when they graduate, it's up to the child to make sure that they get good grades in the class.
Right. And that's what you see here. So a lot of it is, so you see the quality points. It is very complicated because some high schools work on trimesters, some work on semester courses, there's block scheduling. So what the NCAA does is they present all this information. So if your son or daughter in any state, in any part of a state, again, we look at our neighboring town, Woodbridge, they're on block scheduling. So their quality points for their GPA is a little different than ours, just because when classes are offered, how many classes kids can take, etc. So that's why we see all this information presented by the NCAA. Again, this goes back to what Mr. Randazza is talking about, Division I academic standards, right? As you see, also, what I alluded to just before, we here at JP Stevens and in Edison require our kids 4 years of English, 4 years of math. The NCAA is only asking kids to take 3 years of math. So again, right there, we're above and beyond. The sciences, they're asking for 2, we require 3. So like we are above and beyond with all these things. So for us here at JP Stevens and in Edison, our kids are in line to be academically qualified. Some of them may even be early qualifiers. And what that means is you see kids leaving high school early or being early qualifiers, if you're reading in the news. So that is a different situation. But some of our kids could be at the end of their junior year or midway through their senior year, could be academically eligible to move to colleges sooner than later. I don't recommend it. I think it's only for special circumstances. I think a 4-year high school education serves many purposes, from the social to the academic to the emotional growth of our students. But for some kids, that's the right choice.
Absolutely. Everybody's situation is different, but you do need emotional maturity in the situation just as much as you need academic to handle all that is required of you. There's a lot of responsibility on your shoulders.
So here in front of you, what I talked about earlier, that sliding scale, what does that mean? Again, as your SAT goes up or your GPA goes up, the other score or ACT, I should say as well, can go in that opposite order. So if you've got a very high GPA, you'll academically qualify with a lower SAT or ACT score. And then the nice thing is they put together this worksheet, which is on the opposite side of this page, that allows you as a parent or a counselor to sit down with a student to say, okay, here's what your A in English means. Here's what your B means, etc. So if your child needed to sit down with one of us, we can walk them through what those quality points mean for them. Again, here we have the Division II standards, similar to Division I, right? Because you are getting athletic money most of the time. But and I know I keep going back to this, our kids in Edison are prepared academically. And well, as long as they're doing their work in the classroom, getting good grades, we've set them up with a schedule that qualifies them academically.
Absolutely.
And so here again, sliding scales a little bit different on the Division II realm. And then when we get to the Division III, vastly different, right? In terms of what is accepted and what's criteria. And again, the major reason for this is Division III athletes do not get athletic scholarships. They would receive academic, merit-based, they could get financial aid, etc. But they're not getting athletic scholarships.
Oh, I have a great question. This is awesome. One of the parents just asked this, and I will get to the other two when we come to the end because they go towards the end. But this one is, with a Division III, does that mean that the college standard is lower? So no, that's important to understand, and that's what I was trying to explain with even with the D1. These are the standards we're giving you are the standards for NCAA for an athlete to qualify for that division. That just qualifies the athlete for that specific division. There's a whole separate qualification for the specific college. So again, there are many D3 colleges. Swarthmore University, one of my best friend's sons is playing basketball there, right? That is like an Ivy League school. You need a 1500 or more on SATs. You need to have a 4.0 GPA or higher. So even though he qualifies D3 NCAA, you still then have to qualify. Each school has their own standards and tiers that go with it. So I hope that makes sense to you.
And to go along that and piggyback on that, understand again, and I think our athletes, our athletes are special. All of our kids are special. I think one of the things that our kids need to understand is, and this is not negative, it's factual. There are so many kids out there playing high school sports. In order to separate themselves, they don't necessarily just need to be a great athlete, but academically, if they excel, whether it be on the SAT or every day in the classroom, they now set themselves apart. Again, as a former Division III coach, one of the things that was very easy for me was when I'd go into the home of an athlete and I was able to look at their transcript or get the transcript from a counselor. It was, okay, we don't ever have to be concerned with this student getting into our school. So now we can aggressively recruit him because he's going to get in on his merits. When we recruited and went into the home of a student who wasn't qualifying or in great academic standards, it was always, well, we'd love to have you, but you have to get into school. And I'll harken back to my days as the head boys basketball coach here at JP Stevens. I had an athlete who's, ironically, his counselor was Mrs. Randazza. He was offered a Division II scholarship, I want to say in the fall before his senior year. And the school came to his home and the head coach said to myself and his parents, look, you need to up your SAT score and we need your mid-semester grades to be A's and B's. Unfortunately, that young man could not up his SAT score, nor did he put himself in the position of getting A's and B's mid-semester or mid-year, I should say. That scholarship was then not offered to him, right? He eventually got a scholarship to a Division II school in Kentucky, eventually left that school, but would have been much better at this Division II school in New Jersey. Probably would have had a great career there and been very happy being surrounded by his family. But again, how do we set ourselves apart? Academically is one of the best ways.
Absolutely.
Do we have any more questions now, or you wanted to wait for them?
Okay, we do have a question here. Do we have a list of sports specified for each division? Yes, and that's actually on the slideshow. And if you do a search Any of these questions are really simple in Google searches, but D1, D2, D3, NCAA, athletic programs, and they will give you specific sports for each division. Another person is asking, I don't see cheerleading on any of the lists. Very interesting question. Yes, so here we go. My sister was a cheerleader at Rutgers University, okay? And Rutgers University is a D1 school. They, at the time, did not consider cheerleading, and I actually don't think it's on the list yet, as a sport. They consider it an activity. Now, they did get the students some academic scholarships, but it doesn't fall under the realm of the athletic scholarships. Also understand that we're going over what NCAA sports have at the school. That doesn't mean that the school doesn't have a, Mr. Cardillo, my mind's going blank. What is it called? Like a rec program?
Competitive cheer team?
Yes. Like,
okay.
So they, yeah, a lot of schools have, like, let's say you wanted to play, hockey, or you want to go on the swim team, but the swim team, this specific school, you didn't make it. So you didn't make it on the swim team, but you still want to play. So they actually have, the colleges have like intramural sports, and you get to be on that
team.
Club teams. That's it. That was the word I was thinking of. So it's a club team. And a lot of the schools do have club teams. You don't have to fall under any of these standards. You don't get any money for those teams, but they do still have teams that you can be a part of. Somebody's asking now about what about tennis? Absolutely. Again, after this is over, take the time to go through these slides and look back through them. It's on there. It has all of the sports that are in each division. It has everything that each school has, and you can look it up. You can just even do a search if you're looking for a specific school, if they have that. Cricket, I do not know many schools that actually have a D1 or D2 cricket team. That is something we'd have to look back at the chart for. You'd have to look at the chart, but I do know that there are club teams.
Right, club teams.
Yeah.
So a couple little things. Remember that non-money bearing sports like a tennis are not, those kids for most schools in America are not getting full athletic scholarships. It's usually a small, so what those non-money bearing sports, your tennis, your volleyball, think sports of that nature for the most part, right? Now, again, different levels. So a Big Ten team like Penn State, Rutgers, Wisconsin, they have the Big Ten network and television networks that are feeding millions of dollars into the program. With that being said, their big moneymaker sports are football and basketball. So those non-bearing, money-bearing sports like tennis, like golf, those, what normally happens is those sports get an allotment of money. And so they would get $500,000, $250,000. I'm making up figures here. So bear with me on that. So you might have 10 athletes on that tennis team or on that golf team, and they only have $250,000. That coach has got to divvy up that money in the way that he or she feels is the right way that it fits for their team. So those athletes are usually not getting full athletic scholarships. And that's where we run into the questions of, well, my son or daughter plays Division I. Why aren't they getting a full athletic scholarship? And that is why. And that happens even in baseball. It happens in wrestling, happens in softball, as Mrs. Randazza spoke about earlier.
Happens in football. I know a lot of students that wanted to play, and the coaches, came out and said, listen, we want you. We want you on the team. We have given away all our football money. We have tapped out the money we've been given. Do you want to be a walk-on? And so for the first year, the athlete says, yeah, if you're taking me, I'll be a walk-on, which means you don't get any money that year, but maybe they'll make an agreement with you for the following years. So, and that happens a lot. And all of those charts are actually in NCAA files. You can look up the percentages of people. It's not even 58% of people getting with all the scholarships. But I do want to go back to the D3 thing though, because I'm getting some questions here about that. D3, like I said, they do not give athletic money, but a lot of schools, if they're interested in you for athletics, they find you other money. So even though it's not called athletic money, you're getting money in a different fashion. So for example, my youngest daughter playing field hockey, no, she plays D3, so she didn't get athletic money, and she was very academic. I will grant you that, but she goes to a very academic school. But her 5 best friends on the team are all getting more than 70% of the school paid for. And my daughter's one of them. She got a 70% scholarship, which was incredible. Again, it's considered academic or money from other places. They'll find it for you. And they wanted her. So even though they don't call it athletic money, they still can, the coaches work things out with you, and they can get you in, and they do different things. So don't cross that off your list by all means.
We have another question about, I use the term a money-bearing sport. So I should say a revenue-bearing sport is actually the correct term. Revenue-bearing sports are things like football, basketball, both men and women, more so on the men's side, that are bringing in millions of dollars, okay? Television revenue, bowl games, NCAA tournament money. So schools are primarily making money, colleges, right, on those big sports, your football, your basketball. Most other sports work, and most schools work in a deficit, meaning they're losing money by having that sport. Then they make up that money with your revenue-bearing sports. Okay, listen. Let's be very realistic about and I'm going to go back to our percentages, okay? Because people are asking about Rutgers University and swim, and so that's a division, right? That's a Division I, Big Ten school. Most Division I schools are identifying their athletes at the 8th and 9th grade level. Most, all right? So yes, your student, as Mrs. Randazza talked about earlier, could come on to a team as a walk-on. Sometimes they're even preferred walk-on where they're invited, right? I have a very, very good friend of mine who is a walk-on basketball player at Seton Hall University. This young man, or now he's an adult, was an extremely out of the ordinary person with a tremendous drive for success. And those numbers of walk-on athletes, and he eventually got a scholarship for his last 2 years at Seton Hall and played. These are very rare occasions. So please be honest with yourself and your child. To receive a scholarship or get onto a Big Ten roster, if you're not identified early, is very, very difficult. Not impossible, but very, very difficult. Again, we're going back. 1% of all high school athletes, right, are getting scholarships. And then you have really the average is 7% of all high school athletes are going on to play Division I, II, or III. 7%.
Total together, yeah.
Right, all together. So right now, if 100 athletes, senior athletes, are graduating from J.P. Stevens High School this year, 7 of them are going on to play Division I, II, or III. 7, and the majority of them are going on to play Division III. So please be honest with your child, be honest with yourself, that these opportunities are very, very unique. We'll get to some more questions. I want to cover this because this is a big question, and the top one of what is an agent. So right now, if your child's involved in a sport, you may be contacted by someone who says, I can get you scholarship money. I could get you into a college. There are many, many people, many, many companies like that. Most of them are selling you a poor product. And what they're doing is they are just sending out information to schools, and they have no guarantee to get you money. So if it doesn't seem realistic, it probably isn't. So be very, very careful as to who you trust with your money and who tells you we can get you a scholarship. So buyer beware is one of my major ideas that I present to parents who are asking me about this. Most of the time, it is not realistic.
And each sport is very different. For example, football really doesn't have football travel team. Okay, so football, most of those stats and the videos and the things that are sent out to coaches are done through the high school team. But you have, as Mr. Cardillo knows, because he even coached outside basketball as well, you have travel basketball programs. Okay, you have travel softball programs, you have hockey. Most of them are all travel programs, and then you still play at your high school. But those travel coaches can also help depending on the sport we're talking about. Soccer is a big one. Soccer statistics and soccer outside travel coaches work differently with the college coaches. So that's something you have to be aware of, what sport you're talking about and exactly what that entails. And if you're unsure, right, you're going to have your child meet with their counselor and they can go over this, or you can always reach out to us and ask us questions. I'm going to, at the end, anybody that didn't get their question answered, we are going to answer them. I do want, somebody's asking, and this is the second time, is Division 1 and 2, are they about school size or team's ability? It is not school size. It is not school size at all. Like I said before, it's about ability, how they qualify. I'm going to make you laugh. Most people know, or at least have heard of, Notre Dame football. Okay. And if I ask, and you're all asking, are our students getting this information? Do they get this? This is all going to be posted. And we do talk to our students about this as well. But when I ask the students, like, oh, okay, what, how big do you think Notre Dame is? And they all imagine Notre Dame College being like 50,000, as big as Rutgers, or even bigger than a Rutgers school, right? Because Rutgers has over 50,000 students that go there. And Notre Dame size total for all 4 years and graduate school put together is like 7,300. Notre Dame is actually quite small on the scale. Yet they're one of the biggest Division 1 schools there is. Okay, so it is not about school size. It's about the team's ability and where they place in that.
Did you want to tackle some more, or you want to wait?
I'll wait for now. I was just trying, that was
Okay.
like 3 of them.
Right. So, and also to go back, just to piggyback 1 second on Mrs. Randazza's point about club teams. Club teams, oftentimes, or AAU teams, have no bearing at all on if you get into that school. So I know there's a question about like the Scarlet Aquatic Club. Again, please do not be fooled or convinced that if you go to a club team and pay thousands of dollars, or an AAU team and pay thousands of dollars, does it guarantee you anything? Those are separate entities, okay? And again, buyer beware. This does not guarantee you anything. So most of the time, okay, when a college athlete is trying to, or a high school athlete is trying to become a college athlete, it has to do with 2 major things: your ability, your sheer ability in that sport, and then your academics, right? Those are the 2 factors. Not where you played your club team, not where you played AAU, and most of the time, not even where you played high school basketball or high school football or at any high school. Most of the time, it does not matter. What matters is sometimes it could be the strangest thing. A coach goes to see an athlete and there's 100 coaches in the gym watching that athlete, and all it takes is one coach to give them an opportunity. I will tell you this story from many years ago when I was the assistant coach. One of our players here at JP Stevens went to a showcase tournament that happened to be run here at JP Stevens at the time. It was a 2-day event. This young man had a great 2 days. NJIT happened to be in the gym. This young man happened to fit the mold of everything NJIT basketball was about. At the end of that 2-day process, after they checked with his academics, that young man was offered a basketball scholarship. Was not a great high school player, did not play on an AAU team with any real name or name recognition, but it just took that one coach. So sometimes we get caught up and we pay thousands and thousands of dollars for our kids. We're convinced this is the only, my son or daughter has to play travel sports. Sometimes that has no bearing at all. The next slide I want to point out, because we do have only about 10 minutes left, some recruiting terms. If you want to familiarize yourself and understand what all this means, this is a great little tool for you. Whether it's the calendar on the right side of the page or the recruiting terms, what do all these things mean? You know, I'm hearing that there's a quiet period, or I'm hearing that there's a dead period. What do these mean? What's the difference between an official and unofficial visit? This slideshow offers you a great introduction into what this all means, especially if you're the neophyte, if you don't know anything about this, or your child doesn't know anything about this, right? Just as they educate themselves in their classroom, or you're educating yourself on colleges themselves, this is a great little tool for you to use in order to understand the whole recruiting process and what all these things mean. Again, go through this when we're done. See why, coach contacted my child. Then I didn't hear from the coach for 2 weeks. Why? Well, there's a time when a coach can contact your child at the Division I level. Division III, there are no real recruiting periods, right? But you kind of understand why. So that's kind of it for the slideshow in terms of, what we want to present. I do encourage you, just as Mrs. Randazza said, go back and take a look at this. It'll be posted on our website. If you can't find it, contact your child's school counselor. They can send it to you. Mrs. Randazza or myself can send it to you. But now we'll open the floor for questions. Mrs. Randazza, if you want to take that.
Yes, absolutely. So
first of all,
just so that you know, I am going to ask all the counselors to, not only are we posting this on our website, I'm going to ask all the counselors to post it on their Google homeroom so that your students will have access to it on Google homeroom. I'm also going to send out to all the homerooms, anyone that thinks that they're interested in playing a sport in college, to sign up on a Google sheet that I'm going to make. I'm going to take their names and I'm going to have separate groups and meet with them. So they get all of this information the same way you just did, and maybe a little bit more in depth, I hope. Somebody had a question. So he says about volleyball. If volleyball does not guarantee for athletic scholarships, will they be eligible to get some kind of benefit, like preferences in another way, money? So let me just understand that Mr. Cardillo didn't say that volleyball doesn't guarantee it. I actually know many students that are on full rides for volleyball. It's just that each team, it depends on how much money they get. So there's money for all sports, and just like as the school has to put the same percentage of money into a girl sport as a boy sport. There's rules on that as well, but it also depends on the number of students that are involved. For example, your biggest number usually in scholarships goes to football, because that has the biggest number of players on a specific team. Where basketball, only 5 students can play on the court at one time. So, of course, they'll have a bench of like 14 or 15, but it's a different number than a bench that holds like football of, 58 athletes. So the numbers vary, but yes, they can get money from all different ways. That's what the schools work it out. When they talk to you, the coach works it out. They'll present you with a package, and then you find out where that money's coming from, whether it's coming from Division I can actually give like money from, that was sent in from a donor or other places. They can give you scholarships and grants if they don't just call it athletic. It depends. It comes in different ways, and that would be done through the coach. But like I said,
a lot of that, just to piggyback real quick, Ms. Renette, there's no one answer to that question, because every university is different and every situation is different. So again, your son or daughter could qualify and get academic money. There's grants available, as Mrs. Randazza said, sometimes sports have a pool of money that is donated by boosters that they can use to give other scholarships. And it could be, I've seen the silliest thing from a left-handed athlete with asthma, is eligible for a $500 grant. And they're able to, because they're able to steer money from donations to give to some of those athletes. So be a student of the scholarship process. So when you do meet with a coach, you can ask questions and they will, as Mrs. Randazza said, they'll present to you a financial package, which will detail how much money is coming from athletics, how much is coming from academics and other avenues as well.
And if you read through this packet that we just went through, there's a lot of detail that we didn't, we don't even have time to go over all of it. So definitely take the time to detail it. Somebody's asking if we're going to send this out to parents. We don't have to. Well, there's no reason for us to send this presentation out to parents. We're going to post the video and this presentation under JP Stevens High School and then go under guidance and you're going to see it there. Okay, so you'll see the presentation, the actual packet. You can download it, you can print it out, you can even just Google it and get it off of the internet, but you can get it off of our JP Stevens page. And we will also post the recording, as well as I said, I am going to send it to all of the students' homerooms. So yes, it will be posted on all of that. Let's see.
I could grab the next one about just to give you a glimpse into coaches, okay? Because there's a question about, do coaches come out to individual matches or games? The answer is yes and no, okay? Most of the time, students, athletes are identified early in the process. Usually, and I'll give you my experience as a college coach, it was easy for us to when we originally recruited players, to go see them in a travel type event. And the simple answer was, I could go to a gym in one day and watch 15 to 20 or even more potential college basketball players. Once we then identified them and said, these are the kids that we want to recruit, then I would go to a high school gym to watch that individual team play. But there were definitely times where a coach would call me or our head coach and say, hey, I really think that this player would be a great fit for you. But now with the technology and games up on YouTube and the advancement of the Huddle app, colleges and high schools have so much video on players and social media and all those things that college coaches are seeing this. So once they initially identify an athlete, then they are likely to come out to a high school to see so many things. You even see college football coaches going to watch high school basketball games. And the reason why is they want to see diversity in athletes, right? College coaches want to see kids playing multiple sports. So please, please don't get into this mindset where, oh, my son or daughter is a volleyball player and that's all they do. College coaches want to see kids play other sports.
To add to that, I will speak definitely from first hand experience. My daughter was being recruited by many colleges and she ended up at Boston College, but we're talking Notre Dame, Penn State, Duke, all of these colleges, were looking into her and, going back and forth. And I do have to tell you, every single college coach, my daughter was a 3-sport athlete. Against her travel coach's wishes, he's like, no, you got to give up your other sports. And every one of the college sport coaches that met with her said, we love that you play more than one sport. We think you're like a better athlete. You're well-rounded. And now that same daughter is actually coaching. She's one of the assistant coaches at Stevens Institute of Technology right here in Hoboken. And that's a D3 school. She's a softball coach there. And she says the same thing. They're looking for well-rounded athletes, not just athletes in that specific sport. Of course, they play that sport, but they love if they played another sport and are athletic in other ways. So let your kid have fun and be happy in high school. Don't make them just stay in one area. I think we're good. Yeah.
Yep.
So if
So
anyone
thank
has
you,
any other
everybody.
questions, you can always, reach out to the counselors. We're always here. And like I said, I am going to be meeting and sending this out. I am going to meet with the high school students as well over the next month. But thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yes, I hope you got something out of it. And if you do have further questions, please don't hesitate to follow up with us. Really appreciate your time. I know sometimes early in the morning with work and getting kids off to school is difficult. So thank you all for attending. And we will do this again next year for the younger athletes, or maybe your questions will be a little bit different, but thank you all for attending.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Thank you.